everybody. This is episode 29 of Eat, Drink, Write, an Urban Fantasy Whiteboard. We are not doing another one up in the mountains. We had too much to do up there. How was your week?
I mean, we were up in the mountains, so it was pretty awesome. I didn't do any writing because I was specifically on vacation. So
yeah.
But otherwise, I mean, it was beautiful and very relaxing, and I think it was a much needed break from both writing and work. So.
And COVID isolation and all of that. It was wonderful. It was so beautiful up there. I went out on our deck here and said, let's podcast outside again. And it's 90 whatever degrees out there. And we came right back inside. So
it's only like 20 degrees hotter than it was in our vacation spot. It's not too bad, is it?
Yeah. So we're inside back in our usual room, my craft room. What are you eating and drinking today?
So we were kind of eating the same thing, but we ordered some Mexican food. So I got fajita nachos, and I'm drinking a lime vodka soda.
Yeah. I got Mexican chicken with Mexican white cheese and mushrooms on it.
Oh, yeah.
My mouth is watering. I mean, I've already eaten it. And I'm drinking a keto conglomeration. I couldn't find my grapefruit keto. I was going to do another salty dog because that was really good.
Yeah.
So I've got a bubbly lime with a little bit of tangerine La Croix,
right,
and orange extract and a lime, and it's okay.
Just okay?
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's got alcohol in it, so I mean,
alcohol.
maybe it'll get better as time goes on.
Vodka, and I'm drinking out of my hoard cup.
Oh,
which you can't
lovely.
really see.
No, you can't.
Hoard design.
It should have been like in black or something like that. But yeah, very cute. You got that at Dragon Con?
I did.
Yeah.
Dragon Con last year, I think.
Last year. Oh yeah, because I got some Resident Evil cups for myself. Nice.
I have a joke.
Oh,
first I have to tell everybody what we're talking about because that's why the joke would be relevant.
Oh, fair. Yes.
So our topic is Mary Sue characters, which are basically the perfect characters. So the joke is talking about perfect people. The preacher was addressing his congregation. There's no such thing as a perfect woman. If anybody has known a perfect woman, please raise your hand. No one reacted. He then asked, is there anybody who has known a perfect man? Albert, an elderly man, raised his hand. Are you sure you've known an absolutely perfect man? The preacher asked, somewhat surprised. No, I didn't know him personally, replied Albert, but I have heard a great deal about him. He was my wife's first husband.
Wow, that's brutal.
It was the only thing I could find on perfect. It was kind of funny. So.
No, that is really funny. So, brutal, but funny.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about Mary Sue's, and you go ahead and start.
Yeah, so what is a Mary Sue? I feel like it's talked about all the time. Especially when you're first learning to write, you might hear the term Mary Sue and all that kind of stuff. So what is it? It's a generic name for any fictional character who is so competent or perfect that this appears absurd, even in the context of the fictional setting. There is a male version, and the one that I've seen most is Gary Stu. I have seen other ones, and I can't remember them off the top of my head right now, but I have seen other male counterparts to this term. And then it's also an over-idealized and seemingly flawless fictional character, often seen as a self-insertion character. These characters are often physically beautiful, exceptionally skilled, and universally admired in a story.
Yeah, they usually have an exotic name. Their beauty is somehow exotic, like the violet eyes, that kind of thing.
Right.
And a Mary Sue can totally destroy your work. It's the whole story attempts to revolve itself around how perfect this character is, and it's just not realistic.
Right.
I mean, even people that are really good people are going to have people that don't like them.
You're right.
And a Mary Sue, everybody loves the Mary Sue.
Right, yeah.
So, and you probably know this too, but where this term came from, I'm a big Trekkie fan.
Yes.
So the very first Mary Sue was actually a character named Mary Sue. She was Lieutenant Mary Sue of the USS Enterprise. And this Paula Smith wrote a satirical story called A Trekkie's Tale, where she created this parody of unrealistic characters that seem to always pop up in fan fiction. So it actually goes back to fan fiction is where this term was coined. It was back in 1973. So that's where it came from, and I was all excited about that because I'm
big Trekkie fan.
Trekkie fan.
She's a big Trekkie fan. Yeah, so you know, a lot of the time I feel like this Mary Sue type character is talked about in like a negative light. You don't often, or at least I haven't often seen it in any sort of positive light. It's typically like, you know, oh, this is a bad thing. And, you know, I was curious, is it actually a bad thing? So as I was researching this, I was like, you know, it's actually really just a cliche. It's been done a million times before. It's been seen a million times before. And that's really what makes it like a quote unquote bad thing, is mostly just because it's unoriginal. And that kind of makes it a bland story.
Right.
A lot of the time. Oftentimes it's seen as a boring character because it's difficult to have a Mary Sue character experience growth. And that's mostly like what I enjoy reading for. Like that's one of my favorite things of all time about reading stories is just like experiencing the character growth through a story. That is just like, that's my favorite thing.
I do. I love character arcs too. In fact, there was a movie that I don't think you've seen yet. It's one of the Truth or Dare movies.
Oh.
And I think it's one of the more recent ones. And the character arc of that main character is amazing.
Huh. I'll have to watch it.
It's a horror film. It's a cliche horror film.
Yeah.
But I loved the character arc of that main character and where she ended up at the end.
Yeah.
It was a good one.
I'll have to watch that one because I've heard you talk about it before, but I've never gotten the chance to watch it. Or like I think I watched half of it and then for some reason had to stop and could never find it again.
And I would say that she might have started out as a Mary Sue character, that main character.
Just like very well liked, very like pretty, very
Yeah. And then her arc and what they go through in this horror movie, lots of rocks,
right?
Changed her, and what she ended up doing is interesting.
Huh. Yeah, I'll have to find that one. I'll have to find, maybe you can, I think there are 2 movies called Truth or Dare.
There are, and I've watched them both.
Oh, okay.
And one was, it might have even been Spanish speaking. I watch subtitles because I don't hear very well. And so I don't have any problem watching foreign films because I read the subtitles anyway. So, and I think one of the Truth or Dare ones was Spanish.
Yeah.
And one wasn't, but I think there are several out there, and I like to watch all of them. I'm a big horror fan, so
especially the grade B ones.
Yeah, I'm famous for picking that out. Which I must say, on our vacation up in the mountains, that we had a big theater room.
Oh yeah.
It was one of my favorite things, which is sad because we were in the beautiful mountains, but this huge movie theater room. And Sydney and I watched horror movies.
Yes.
Everybody else was, hot tub, playing pool, sitting on the deck, reading, whatever. And Sydney and I are down there watching horror movies. It was great. We watched The Invisible Man, the new one. Amazing.
Yeah, you said it was good. She said it was really good too. So
yeah.
I'm going to have to watch that.
Yeah, I would not classify that as grade B at all. That was a real.
No, it seemed like an actual, like, very well done,
a real one,
well-funded movie. So, yeah.
So
say you want to avoid writing a Mary Sue, how can you do that? Because, there's a time and a place for cliches. So you could do a Mary Sue and you could probably do it very well as long as you have that intention. If you make it like on purpose, I feel like it could be done very well. I feel like writing rules are made to be broken kind of thing. So, but if you want to avoid writing a Mary Sue, just add in setbacks to your plot that will frustrate your protagonist. If they can solve everything without effort, then, there wouldn't be any conflict in the story. Like, what's the point of, reading that, they're not going through any growth, they're not learning anything, they're not having any issues,
Yeah, that's boring.
Right. So the journey towards a goal is more compelling when you put your character under pressure. This pressure should be both external and internal. So like think about your character's flaws and like their personality and that type of thing. What challenges might they create for themselves? Because, I think of Beck all the time and she just gets herself into all kinds of trouble with just the things she says because she doesn't think them through. And
and that's what's so funny is when I had it critiqued at one of the Atlanta workshops, the fellow that critiqued it said, I think she might be too Mary Sue, which I found very funny because she's not, but that was the way she was coming across in the beginning. So that's something that I had to work on.
Why did he say that? Was it because she owns a bookstore? And
Yeah,
was like,
she's successful. She's happy with her sisters. She has an ex-husband that still gets along with, so life is good.
Gotcha. Okay.
But that's also a setup for how bad things can get.
Right.
So I don't think that she was Mary Sue, but he didn't read enough of it to know. And that's on me, because if I've got an agent looking at it going, oh no, this is a Mary Sue, that's on me to make sure that I change that beginning so that she's not coming across as too fanciful.
Right.
And too cute and too pretty.
Right.
So yeah, that was just an interesting thing, thinking of Beck, because she's definitely got her issues.
Beck is an interesting character.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you guys get to read about her someday, because she's a trip. Throw rocks at your characters. Make these rocks difficult to overcome. Make it so that they have to think about how to get through these issues. Make them be clever. Make them make mistakes. It's more interesting to read about. I love seeing a character who's just, unfortunately for my characters, I like to see them tossed down and kick them while they're down. It's fun. It's great.
Yeah, because even though your last book that I just read,
the Mac book,
she is a beautiful, likable, strong woman, but she has real flaws.
She's got her flaws.
Yeah. And so even though we're rooting for her, I mean, being a Mary Sue doesn't mean that they aren't liked. I mean, they're liked, and she was a great character. I really liked her a lot, but she has flaws and real issues.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are important to put in anyway, just to have an interesting character. I don't think that there's any person in this world who doesn't have a flaw. So I feel like it's only realistic to look at where your characters come from, what kind of backstory they have. I think I talk about this a little bit in the future too. I talk about it now.
Yeah.
Which is a good segue. And the flaws is the title of this section. So think about their flaws, their backstory, their personality, the relationships that they have with other characters are really good inspiration for, well, what are their downfalls? Like, what are their pitfalls? You can do so many things with relationships with other characters, even just personality. One of my characters, Aiden, is very stubborn. It gets her into a lot of trouble. And like you said, Mac, like, she's got her issues that, spurs on the plot as well.
The thing about flaws, though, with a Mary Sue is that a lot of times a Mary Sue character has flaws, but they are endearing flaws. They have to be realistic flaws.
They do, yeah.
One of my favorite all-time books ever in this entire world is called The Bride, and it's by Judith. Holy cow! How
do you spell that last name?
I can't. I can't believe I don't remember. Garwood.
Okay.
Julie Garwood. One of romance was where I started from way back when I was young, and she is she actually writes other things now. She's, I think, got bored with the romance and went on. But The Bride, that character, looking at all of these definitions, I think it was a Mary Sue. She had the violet eyes.
Right.
She had a man's name back this was set in the 1500s.
Right.
So her name was Jamie, which is considered a male name back then. And her flaw was that she had a bad sense of direction, which added humor. It was an endearing
But it was
flaw.
endearing, yeah.
But I mean, there were other issues that she had.
Sure.
So that is one of my favorite all-time books ever in this entire world.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that it was a bad thing.
Right.
That she was a Mary Sue type character.
Well, again, if you write it, like, it depends on how you write it too, because there are so many ways to write different types of characters that could be considered quote unquote bad characters.
Right.
But it can be done well. Like, it can be done.
Yeah.
There's, they exist and they have done well before. So
yeah.
Which I think we have a list of examples coming up here, but and we've talked, make sure their flaws are realistic. You don't want to write flaws for the sake of writing flaws in to appease writing rules. Like, I feel like that just kind of defeats the purpose of telling a story. Make sure that your characters are realistic, which we've talked about character development in the past, and one of our previous episodes, I think one of our early ones, and just building a character to be a person and not just a let's check off these boxes kind of thing.
So what are some of your examples?
Yeah, so Luke Skywalker from Star Wars.
And that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't change Luke Skywalker for anything.
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
a big Star Wars fan too. And I mean, in fact, a lot of the characters in the Star Wars movies could be considered Mary Sue's.
Absolutely. As I was researching this actually and trying to find some examples, Star Wars kept popping up a lot. Both the old movies and the newer ones that have been coming out. Because a lot of people say Rey, which I don't think you've seen the newer movies. A lot of people say Rey is a Mary Sue, and so I think Star Wars probably has a bunch of them, but I think it's because it's a typical good versus evil story.
Well, and I have to interject here because the whole audience might have just gasped that I hadn't watched the new ones. Let me explain why. I am a huge fan, but my 14-year-old hasn't seen any of them. And so I'm like, okay, we've got to do this right. We've got to have a big Star Wars party and watch them all back to back to back to back. And so we finally get to the point we're in lockdown. There's nothing else to do. And I'm like, let's do this. And she's like, I don't really want to.
Oh.
And
well, then you ought to just watch them.
I have been waiting all of this time to watch all of the new Star Wars, and she has no interest. So I told your father, I'm like, it's time.
Yeah,
I'm ready. I'm not waiting on her anymore.
Right.
So that's the only reason why I was trying to do this for my youngest.
Of course. The next one is James Bond.
See, another really good one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bella Swan from Twilight.
Yeah, and that's a kind of good one.
It depends on how you look at it. It allows the reader to self-insert. Bella kind of acts as a blank slate in Twilight, and so the reader, which is typically a teenager, is able to self-insert and be like, have this fantasy story that's like whatever. So it depends on how you look at it. It's not my cup of tea now, but I did enjoy it when I was a teenager.
I actually like the book. I know it's not super strongly written, but I love the story. I mean, it obviously became a sensation for a reason.
Well, I think it was also one of the first of its kind where it's, a more modern vampire versus werewolf type story. So like vampires were just becoming like the new thing. I was in high school, so this is like 10 years ago.
So, I mean, people make fun of anybody who likes the Twilight books. I've read the books. We've got all the books, and we've seen the movies, and I love them. There is a place and a time for that kind of fiction. I love most books. I just, if you want to read a light, fluffy, really cool fantasy romance, that's
vampire, like that's what you go for. The last one that I have is Richard from the Sword of Truth series, and I've read at least 6 of these books, and Richard drives me insane.
Really?
He drives me nuts. I wouldn't recommend them, to be honest.
It's a high fantasy, right?
Yes. Yeah. I lost interest after about 6 books. That's not to say that they're bad. They just weren't my cup of tea after a while.
Yeah, I think your dad loves them.
Yeah, and I think I've read more than him. So,
really?
But Richard drove me insane because he is very much a Mary Sue, can do everything correctly, on the first try. Like, it just, the other characters were great. I enjoyed reading about the other characters rather than Richard. I don't really care about Richard. So,
I've got some too. Alice from the Resident Evil movies. And part of why she's a Mary Sue is because when movie number 1 starts, she doesn't remember who she is. Yeah. So there are no flaws that we know of yet. There is no preconceived.
Well, yeah, and I also feel like a character with amnesia, that's also like a certain type of self-insert. Like, what if I woke up and didn't remember anything and this was my life now and I'm suddenly fighting zombies and all that kind of thing. And she's
super powerful, and she, beats all the zombies, and, she makes it through however many 6 movies.
Right. Yeah, I think 6. I'm not sure. I lost track of the number.
And I've watched all of them too.
Yeah.
Those used to be date movies. I'm one of those weird people.
I still love them. Like
movie.
At least the first 4-ish were decent.
But another one, Aragorn from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I mean, he is.
But I love him.
I do too, and he's got flaws. I mean, like when you first start this, he had totally given up on his history and was just wandering the wilderness as a ranger,
right?
Which is cool,
right?
That is a cool thing,
yeah.
But yeah, he's a Mary Sue type character, right. And then the quintessential Mary Sue character, Captain America.
Oh yes, the good boy do-gooder.
Yeah, I mean, even now in today's world, he's still a do-gooder.
Yeah.
And you know, those are examples of Mary Sue's that work.
Yeah.
So we're not saying that this is something you can never do, just be aware of it.
Yeah.
So I did a whole list of how can you tell if your character's a Mary Sue, because it struck home for me, because that reviewer thought that Beck was a Mary Sue, and I was like, she's really not. So how can I read my own stuff and tell?
Right. Yeah.
And the first thing is, like you said, it's the self-insertion, that self-projection. You're putting your own self into that character,
right,
which a lot of younger writers or newer writers do, because there's, you know, a book is a labor of love, and it is like our child. And so you do want to put things that you love into them. Right. So it can happen. But look at the names of your characters. Did you name them because it's a name that maybe you want to name one of your kids? Huh. Like when I was a kid, I wanted 4 children, which I had 4 children, but I wanted Rock, Tree, Sky, and Brook.
Guys, I could have been named Rock.
But if I wrote a book and made one of my characters Rock because that was what I wanted my kid to be named, that's a sign that you might have a Mary Sue character.
Right.
Does your character have the same hobby that you have? Does your character look like you? Blonde hair. And I have had, like, Kata has the frizzy blonde hair in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I can relate to her on that, but I am way older than she is. I mean, I have nothing else in common with her.
Right.
But she does have, and part of it is because it's not a bad thing to write what you know. And I know how my hair handles the Atlanta heat and the humidity.
Right.
So that just makes it realistic. It's not necessarily a Mary Sue. But do you make the character look like you? Do other characters comment on how beautiful or handsome that character is?
I was guilty of this when I first started writing. I was like, oh, everyone's handsome, everyone's beautiful, especially my main character. And I, you know, going back and reading drafts of books that I wrote like 9 years ago, it's painful because I do all of that. Like I do write, you know, oh, I'm so beautiful and they're blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh no.
Or that overt humbleness where they don't ever realize that they're so gorgeous, but everybody else sees it. That's another cliche type Mary Sue thing. Does your character have exaggerated, exotic characteristics, like being very petite? You know, she's so cute, she's 5'1", or she's super tall and Amazonian.
Right, right.
After a fight or battle, does your character still smell fresh and clean and is energetic? I mean, you know, Beck vomits after her first battle, so she is not super clean. But you don't want your, you know, like I think you've said all the way through, you just have to make your characters real, and it's not realistic. I mean, I walk up the stairs and I'm sweating. So, you know, anyone after a battle should not be fresh, clean, and energetic anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they've had many battles, do they have scars? You know, someone who's really good at this is the one with Atlanta with the shift.
Kate Daniels.
Kate Daniels.
Yeah.
She doesn't find herself beautiful, which is, and I don't know that she is beautiful. She's striking.
Yeah.
And she's strong. And her husband finds her beautiful, but you know, she's got scars and she's got issues and flaws internally and externally. And you got to bring that out. You can't have a perfect looking character who's gone through the trauma that Kate Daniels went through,
right? And
you know, still look perfect. This is a good one. Does your character have views that are different and yet everybody in the book loves them?
Right.
Like in today's world, you've got the issue with gay people, you've got the issue with racism. And so if you have your main character be a strong proponent of those things and everybody agrees with them, and unfortunately that's not realistic.
Right.
You know, and that is more of a Mary Sue character. They're like, you know, oh, she's so right. Well, I wish it worked that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not realistic. Are your character's actions always justified and right as seen by herself and others, or himself and others?
Right.
You know, everything she does or he does is always the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you choose your character's occupation because you thought it was cool? Now, I'm guilty of that too.
Right.
Because if I need my character to do something and that's not really super important to the story. I just need her to have a job.
Right.
Sometimes I do pick a cool job because, I would have loved to have done that job. So that, I guess I'm guilty of that too.
Yeah.
And in urban fantasy and regular fantasy, does your character have a really cool power that makes it too easy? You talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
You don't want them to have an easy time solving whatever the conflicts are, or it's boring.
Right. Or if they do have like a super cool power, then just like give them something that's equally as cool and powerful. Like,
yeah.
make it difficult for it to overcome. They can have cool powers. That's like the whole point of urban fantasy, is like just give them cool powers.
Really big boulders at them.
Yes. Forget the rocks. Throw a whole boulder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No. Those are all really good points, because I didn't actually see any of those as I was researching for this. So I'm glad you brought that
Well,
up.
I mean, it hit home because what the reviewer said about my character, and so I was like, well, how do I know? Because I obviously didn't think Beck was.
Right.
And she's not. But I've done something wrong in the beginning if I'm already got my reader looking at it and going, oh, she's too
Mary Sue.
Yeah, too Mary Sue. So
I feel like you need a whole story to kind of decide, though. You know, I feel like not necessarily go through the entire book that you're reading and then decide after that, but I think it takes more than the first 10 pages that he read and be like, oh, this is a Mary Sue. I think you need to see some big decisions made, and a lot of the time in the first 10 pages, it's about setting up who your character is. And they haven't made decisions yet. They haven't made mistakes. They haven't gotten to see anything. So I don't know. I think Beck was unfairly accused of being a Mary Sue.
I agree.
So there are just like a few more things that I found, like as I was researching this, and I think that they're good points to bring up. There's an issue with the term Mary Sue as it's inherently gendered. So, because the trope's name was gendered from the get-go, if a female character has agency and is good at her job and like is functional as a human being, she's instantly subject to the label of Mary Sue, which is unfair. And I think it's just a good thing to point out as we're using this term and talking about it in this episode. I think it's just important to point out that there are inherent issues with the term itself.
I mean, and that might have been, the reviewer was male, and my character is a successful bookstore owner, and I mean, she comes from money, so there was already money there. So, but she is successful. She's had a successful divorce. Not that you ever call divorce successful, but it's not bitter. They are still friends. And that happens in today's world. And like you said, it might have been a gender thing from when he was reading it.
I think it could have been. I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily always the case, but I think it's definitely something to consider as we're discussing this topic. I think it's important to realize that just because, it is called Mary Sue, it's automatically biased against females.
Yeah.
It came from a female character at the very, when it was originated. So, I think it's just important to point out that Mary Sue is not necessarily a great term for this type of character.
Yeah.
And then, because it often puts down female characters that are good at anything, be it fighting, talking, their looks, anything like that. As soon as it's mentioned that this woman is beautiful and can be a lawyer, like whatever, suddenly she's a Mary Sue because she's too good at it, even though it's really just she's good at her job and she's perceived as normal beautiful. Human. Right. Yeah. A character being good at many things doesn't necessarily make them a Mary Sue. It's when they're able to bypass plot points without difficulty, or when there isn't any conflict among characters because they're so well liked. I think that's what kind of makes it a Mary Sue character, because then there's no story.
I love that when, sometimes since I'm a pantster, I write my character into a corner, and I'm like, how are they going to get? And I love reading those too, where I can't figure out how in the world they're going to overcome this. And sometimes I like to write my characters into a corner, and then I have that epiphany, and it works. Right. Basically, I think what we've said all the way through this episode is just make your characters real. Yep. That's the thing. Real people have real flaws, and they're not pretty. Right. Yeah. So
absolutely. Yeah. That's all I have. Is that all you have?
That's all I got.
All right. I've got an interview question.
Okay.
Do any of your characters share the same hobbies as you? And if so, which ones?
I don't think any of them do. My characters are not like me. My very first one with the twins, nothing like me. She was very young, naive.
Right.
ripped out of her comfort zone. Chitara, which I don't even know that I've ever talked about on here. She
Right.
was a romance. She was not anything like me. No, she was bent on survival.
Right.
Kata, she's trying to survive. She's a young college kid, so nothing like me there. Beck is nothing like me.
Yeah.
So none of them have any of the hobbies that I have.
Yeah, and the reason I chose this question is because I realized that none of mine do either.
Really?
Yeah, because, you know, other than Aiden, who was a student, she's no longer a student by the time the story starts, so like that's already out. But she's also like way more rambunctious and wild than I am. She like actually goes out and does things for her hobbies, whereas I stay in and write.
Mhm.
And I play video games and that kind of thing. And, you know, Aiden goes out and she's usually at the bars. She's usually hanging out with friends. She's doing all that kind of stuff. Mac is a chef, so she's a cook. And,
Yeah.
you know, she owns her own restaurant. And so I like cooking, but I wouldn't call it my hobby.
Yeah.
I enjoy trying new recipes and that kind of stuff. But otherwise, I'm down for like easy cooking, easy recipes, that kind of thing.
I wonder what that means, that none of our characters are anything like us.
I don't know. I wouldn't say that they're not like me. Personality-wise, I think Mac matches me pretty well.
Mhm. I can see that. But none of mine are like, Beck is not like me.
No.
And Kata's not like me.
No.
None of mine are like me.
Yeah, no.
They're just really neat people.
Mm-hmm.
Trick is amazing to me. She's brilliant.
Yeah.
The things that she says, I'm like, wow, how did she know that? And then my husband's like, you wrote it. I'm like, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, she's brilliant. She uses these big words, which must be up here somewhere.
Right.
And one of my personalities or something, I don't know. All the voices in my head.
Yeah, as writers
As writers have.
Yeah, no, neat. Very cool.
And I don't have the outro.
How dare you?
I know.
Well, to begin with the outro, I just want to mention that we did get a Patreon this week.
Oh.
So thank you very much.
Yes.
That's super exciting to us. We do this for fun and we really enjoy it. We like talking about writing. It gets us wanting to write. It's very inspiring to us. And we love having listeners and we love seeing how many listeners we have per week and that kind of stuff. So it was super, super exciting to finally have a Patreon this week. And so thank you very much.
Yes, we did a happy
We
dance.
did do a happy dance. You can find us on all social media, but you can find those links at eatdrinkwritepodcast.com. All of our social media is there. And then Patreon, Patreon /EDW podcast. And we are planning to start, you know, from this moment on, when we mention worksheets and that kind of thing, I think we're going to start putting them on for our Patreon users, just to kind of give them, you know, something more because they're helping support us.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Let us know any topics that you want, and please send me jokes.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.